She walked into a CEO's office with a crayon resume. What happened next changed everything. What would you do if a 6-year-old girl walked into your skyscraper office, handed you a crayon-written resume and said, "I need a job. My mom is dying"? That's exactly what happened to Marcus Langford, a powerful CEO with no time for distractions, until one brave little girl shattered his world with 5 simple words. He thought he had everything. She reminded him what really mattered. This isn't just a story about survival. It's about love sacrifice and what happens when a stranger decides to stay. Stick around. Because this story, it might change you too. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest stories. Enjoy the story. Marcus Langford didn't believe in surprises. Not in his schedule. Not in his life. Every morning was identical to the one before it. Black coffee at 6:30 car, waiting at 7:00. And by 7:45 he was on the 47th floor of Langford Tower, already ahead of the market. Seattle's skyline stretched below his office windows, and inside the air was always sharp, silent, and under control. Just how he liked it, until that morning. It was 8:12 a.m., 12 minutes off his routine, when Dana, his usually unshakable assistant, knocked once and cracked open the office door. Her face was pale, uncertain. "Mr. Langford, someone's here to see you." He didn't look up. "I have no meetings scheduled." Dana cleared her throat. "It's a child." Marcus finally glanced up. "A what?" Before she could explain, the door opened wider, and in walked the most unexpected visitor his company had ever seen. She was tiny, maybe 6, maybe 7. A little too skinny, with brown curls that hadn't seen a brush that morning, and eyes that were both shy and strangely steady. She wore a faded blue hoodie, a jean skirt, and worn-out sneakers that squeaked softly on the marble floor. In her hands was a single piece of lined notebook paper, creased from being folded too many times. She walked right up to Marcus's desk, stood on tiptoe, and placed it carefully in front of him. "I need a job," she said. No hesitation, no smile. Just 4 small words. Marcus stared. This was not happening. The room went quiet. Even the distant hum of the espresso machine seemed to fade. Slowly he unfolded the paper. It was handwritten in oversized, crooked letters. "I can help clean. I don't cry in front of people. I'm quiet. I learn fast. Please." There were crayon stars drawn in the corners. A crooked heart near the bottom. He looked back at her, stunned. She stared back with complete seriousness. He leaned forward, voice softer than he realized. "What's your name?" "Lily," she answered. "Lily James." "And—" Lily, Marcus said carefully. "Why do you think you need a job?" She didn't blink. "My mom is sick." The words were simple, not dramatic, not emotional, just honest. Like she'd said them 1,000 times already. "She doesn't get out of bed anymore, and the clinic says we need to pay or she can't come back." Marcus swallowed. This girl, this small, fragile kid, wasn't here for attention. She wasn't lost. She was on a mission. "I thought maybe," Lily said, lowering her voice, "someone rich could help." Dana was still frozen at the door, holding her tablet like a shield. Marcus waved her out. "Give us a minute." When the door clicked shut, he turned back to the little girl in the blue hoodie. "You came here alone." She nodded. "I looked up your name on Google. My mom said the people in tall buildings are the ones who fix things." Marcus leaned back in his chair, suddenly aware of how tall his office felt, and how small she looked across from him. "I didn't want to wait for someone else," Lily added. "She's getting worse." The way she said it, calm, clear, steady, cut deeper than any boardroom negotiation ever had. Marcus didn't know what to say, so he asked the only question that felt honest. "Does your mom know you're here?" "She wouldn't have let me come," Lily said. "But I had to try." The words hit like a punch to the chest. There were no tears in her eyes. No begging. just a kind of tired bravery that made Marcus feel like he was the one being interviewed. For the first time in years, he felt unsure of what power meant. Then she said something that broke him. "It's not brave," Lily whispered. "It's just what you do when you love someone." And that was the moment Marcus Langford, billionaire strategist, master of every room, knew his life was about to change. Marcus Langford hadn't set foot in a public clinic in over 2 decades. But here he was, 1 hour after Lily James walked into his life, pulling into the narrow lot of Evergreen Community Health Center, tucked between a laundromat and a boarded-up coffee shop in the Rainier district of Seattle. He should have been in a video call with European investors. Instead, he was following a 6-year-old girl through scuffed linoleum floors and flickering fluorescent lights carrying a backpack that looked older than her. Lily walked ahead without hesitation, like she'd made this walk too many times. "She's in room 214, she said simply. "She sleeps a lot." Marcus glanced around. The clinic was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet that came from fatigue from too many patients and too little help. Paint peeling from the corners. Chairs with duct tape holding them together. Nurses with soft eyes but tight voices. The woman at the front desk looked up as they passed, but didn't stop them. Lily clearly wasn't a stranger here. At room 214, she paused. "She might not wake up," Lily said softly, "but I think she'll like you." And then with all the gravity of someone twice her age, she pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit only by a single bedside lamp and the soft green glow of a heart monitor. The woman in the bed was thin, too thin. Her dark hair clung to her face, her arms draped in tubes and wires. Even in stillness, she looked graceful. Sarah James. Her skin was pale lips, dry eyes closed. "She used to be a nurse," Lily said, setting her backpack on the chair beside the bed. "She helped people all the time. But now, nobody helps her." Marcus stood frozen at the foot of the bed, unsure where to put his hands or his eyes. "She doesn't know I came to you," Lily continued. "She'd be mad. She says it's not right to ask people for things." Marcus knelt beside her. "It's not wrong either," he said gently. "Sometimes, you just need someone to show up." Lily didn't say anything. She just reached for her mother's hand and held it like a lifeline. Marcus stepped back into the hallway. His hands trembled a little. This wasn't a business problem he could throw money at and forget. It was raw, human. And for the first time in years, he felt something move in his chest, a kind of urgency that wasn't about deadlines or quarterly earnings. He pulled out his phone. The first call was to Dr. Helen Foster, his personal physician. A woman who didn't just run a private practice, she ran an empire of specialists, diagnostics, and connections. Within 10 minutes, she had a team reviewing Sarah James's chart. The second call was to his legal advisor. "Set up a fund," he said. "Private, anonymous, cover everything. I don't want her worrying about bills ever again." An hour later, a medical transport van arrived. Discreet, clean, professional. Marcus walked back into room 214, where Lily sat, legs swinging beneath the chair, whispering softly to her mom. "We're going to take her to another hospital," he told her. "A better one, with more doctors, more options." Lily blinked. "Will she wake up there?" Marcus didn't promise miracles. "She has a better chance now." The ride to the new facility, Langford Medical Pavilion, was quiet. Marcus rode in the back with Lily and Sarah sitting shoulder to shoulder with a little girl who didn't flinch at the sound of heart monitors or IV clicks. She held her mother's hand the whole time. When they arrived, a team of specialists was already waiting. The room they brought Sarah into was nothing like the one at Evergreen. This one had windows, real sheets, soft light and warmth. Nurses smiled as they worked. Doctors explained things gently. Lily unpacked her backpack onto the small couch by the window. A tattered notebook, a box of crayons, a photo of her and her mom, and a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Marcus. It was a new drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands under a sun. A woman, a child, and a tall man in a dark suit. "You're in this one," she said shyly. Marcus didn't know what to say. He just folded it, tucked it into his jacket pocket, like something precious, and said the only thing that felt real. "I'm here now. I'm not leaving." And he meant it. The first morning at Langford Medical Pavilion didn't begin with beeping monitors or medical charts. It began with the smell of cocoa and the gentle hum of early light spilling through the blinds. Marcus arrived before sunrise. He wasn't in a suit, just a sweater and dark jeans, a brown paper bag in one hand, 2 steaming cups of cocoa in the other. A nurse passing by did a double take. He wasn't the man they were used to seeing in boardrooms or interviews. He looked like a dad, or something like it. Lily was already awake, curled in a chair beside her mother's bed, with a blanket wrapped around her like armor. She looked up as he walked in, and for the first time her eyes lit up, not from surprise, but from familiarity. "You came back," she said. Marcus handed her the cocoa. "Told you I would." She took it carefully with both hands like it was sacred. "How's your mom today?" he asked gently. Lily shrugged. "Same." She moved her hand a little. The nurse said, "That's good." He nodded. "It is." The woman in the bed. Sarah looked nearly the same. Pale. Still. But something was different. The room didn't feel as heavy. The air wasn't filled with dread. There was warmth now. A quiet presence. Marcus sat beside her, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. His mind far from spreadsheets and earnings reports. The door creaked open. Dr. Helen Foster stepped in, clipboard in hand. Sharp, precise, but with kind eyes. "She's stable," Helen said. "Early scans show potential. Her body's under extreme stress, but she's fighting. And with the new treatment we're starting today, she has a chance." Marcus looked at Lily, who was listening carefully, absorbing every word. "She'll need time," Helen added. "Weeks, maybe months. But we're not out of hope." Lily let out a breath, like she'd been holding it for days. "Thank you," she whispered. Helen gave a soft smile, then glanced at Marcus. "And thank you. Not many men in your position would do this." Marcus shook his head. "It's not charity. It's something I should have done a long time ago." After the doctor left, he turned to Lily. "Want to take a walk?" She nodded. They made their way through the hospital's rooftop garden, a quiet space most visitors didn't even know existed. Lily skipped ahead, stopping at each patch of flowers to look closer, asking the names of every color that caught her eye. Marcus didn't know most of them, but he made some up. She giggled when he called one lemon sunshine. Then she stopped and pulled something from her hoodie pocket. Another folded sheet of paper. She handed it to him. It was a drawing. This one showed a tree, 3 figures beneath it, a house in the background. Her mom, and him. Again. "You draw a lot," he said with a small smile. "It helps," she replied. "When I'm scared." He folded it carefully. "This one's my favorite." They sat on a bench near the edge of the garden. Lily's legs swung just above the ground. "Do you think she'll remember me?" she asked softly. "When she wakes up." Marcus paused. "I think you're the one thing she'll never forget." Lily didn't say anything. She just leaned against him, small and quiet, her head resting on his arm. And in that moment, between the sound of wind in the trees and the heartbeat of a girl who carried far too much for someone so young, Marcus Langford understood something he hadn't known before. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't just a good deed. This was the beginning of something real. That night, Marcus didn't go home. Not to his penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay. Not to his glass kitchen or cold, curated silence. He stayed. He didn't sleep much. Just sat in a quiet chair beside Sarah James's bed, while Lily curled up in a cot the nurses had set up in the corner. Every so often she'd mumble something about cartoons or cereal, then drift off again. Even in sleep, she held one corner of her blanket tight in her hand, like it tethered her to something safe. The room was dim, except for the soft green light of the monitors, steady now, stronger than before. Sarah's breathing had improved. Her vitals, once erratic, had found a rhythm. Marcus sat with his elbows on his knees, eyes locked on her face. He didn't understand what had brought him here, not fully. He'd built a billion-dollar empire, knew how to assess risk, manage people, forecast futures. But he hadn't planned for this. For her. For them. And then it happened. A twitch. At first, it was just her fingers shifting lightly beneath the sheet. Then her eyelids fluttered once, twice, before slowly, haltingly, they opened. Sarah's gaze was unfocused, glassy, but awake. Marcus stood startled, unsure what to say or do. Then Lily stirred. She sat up quickly, the blanket falling away. "Mom," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah blinked again. Her head moved the slightest tilt. Her eyes, now filling with tears, locked on the girl by her side. "Lily," she said. Just one word, but it changed everything. Lily scrambled out of bed, running to her mother's side, her small hands wrapping around Sarah's trembling fingers. "You're awake," she cried, tears finally breaking through. Marcus stepped back, giving them space, his chest tight. He watched as Sarah lifted a weak hand to her daughter's face, touching her gently, as if trying to convince herself she was real. "I knew you'd come back," Lily whispered. "I knew it." The nurse entered quietly, then the doctor, both stunned but moving quickly. Vitals were checked. Questions were asked. But in the middle of it all, one moment held still. Lily's hand in her mother's. Alive. Awake. Fighting. When the room settled again, and the professionals stepped out to make their calls, Sarah's eyes shifted toward Marcus. She studied him quietly. Exhaustion written across her face, but also recognition. "You stayed," she said softly, her voice raspy. Marcus nodded, approaching slowly. "Your daughter came to my office," he said. She walked in, handed me a resume. Sarah gave the ghost of a smile. Of course she did. She changed everything he added. Lily looked up at him, eyes wide with pride. "I told you she was amazing." Marcus sat on the edge of the windowsill, folding his hands. "She told me about you, about what you used to do, about how no one helped you when you got sick." Sarah's throat tightened. "I didn't want to ask." "You didn't," Marcus said. "She did." Sarah glanced at her daughter. "My brave girl." Marcus didn't speak for a while. The moment was too full, too fragile. Then, almost as an afterthought, he said quietly, "We transferred you here. I covered everything. You'll get the care you need. Whatever it takes." Sarah's eyes filled again. "Why?" He looked at Lily, then back at her. "Because someone I thought I'd never meet walked into my office and reminded me what matters." Sarah tried to speak again, but emotion overtook her. She squeezed Lily's hand instead, and Lily smiled through her tears. "I told you he'd help," she said, and Marcus, standing in the warm glow of the rising sun outside the window, knew this moment, this reunion, wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of healing, of hope, of a family they never expected, but couldn't imagine living without. 3 days after Sarah opened her eyes, the hospital room looked a little less like a battlefield and a little more like a beginning. The machines were still there. The soft rhythm of the monitors still filled the space. But now there were signs of life that hadn't been there before. A vase of yellow tulips sat on the windowsill, a card taped beside it in Lily's handwriting that read, "You're the best mom in the world." Sarah could sit up on her own now, propped with pillows. Her voice remained quiet, but her eyes were alert, clear, alive. Each day she stayed awake a little longer, smiled a little more, and slowly, cautiously began to believe she might actually recover. Marcus visited every morning, no longer in a rush, no longer in a suit, just jeans, a cup of cocoa for Lily, and quiet presence. The staff knew him by now, not as Mr. Langford, but as Marcus. The man who stayed. The man who asked questions. The man who sat silently beside a 6-year-old girl and learned how to color inside lines again. This morning, Lily had something new for him. As he arrived and set the cocoa on the bedside table, She pulled a folded paper from her backpack, worn at the edges, but treated like treasure. "I made this last night," she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow, took the page gently and unfolded it. There were 3 people in the drawing. One with curly hair and a red heart on her shirt. One in a hospital bed smiling, and one tall in a dark blue jacket holding their hands. They stood in front of a house with sunflowers in the yard and a big sun in the sky. At the top, in looping marker strokes, Lily had written, "Our family." Marcus stared at the paper longer than he meant to. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just felt something settle into his chest. Something heavy and warm and undeniable. "Is that me?" he asked softly. Lily grinned. "Of course. I made your suit look cool." Sarah chuckled, weak but warm. "It's pretty accurate, honestly." Marcus looked up at them, blinking faster than usual. "I don't think I've ever been in a drawing before," he said. "Not one like this." Lily shrugged. "Well, you are now." He folded the paper gently and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket, next to the other one she gave him days ago. "I'm going to frame this," he said. Sarah watched him closely. Her voice still a bit hoarse, but filled with meaning. "You've done more than we ever could have asked. For her. For me." Marcus shook his head. "She's the one who did everything. I just followed her." There was a pause. Not awkward, just full of something they all understood without saying. Lily broke the silence. "When Mom gets out, can we go see that garden again? The one with the fountain?" "Absolutely," Marcus said. "That's the first place we'll go." Later that day, while Sarah rested, Marcus and Lily sat in the garden courtyard outside the recovery wing. The same one where they'd shared drawings and stories and silence just days earlier. The wind was soft, the sunlight slanting through the trees. Lily handed him a daisy she'd picked from a planter. "You can keep it." He tucked it behind his ear dramatically. "How do I look?" she giggled. "Weird, but in a good way." He smiled. Not the kind he used in press interviews or client meetings. A real one. The kind that made you forget how many hours you'd worked or how much time you'd wasted before today. "You know," he said after a while, "I think your mom's the strongest person I've ever met." Lily nodded. "She is. But I think you're right behind her," he added. Lily didn't answer. She just leaned her head against his arm. And that was enough. Back inside, Sarah was still asleep. But there was a different peace in the room now, not the silence of fear, but the stillness of recovery, of healing in progress. Marcus watched over both of them quietly. He didn't check his phone once, and that afternoon, when he finally left the hospital, the drawing stayed tucked against his chest, as close to his heart as anything had ever been. The days had started to blur together. Not in the way they once did for Marcus Langford, packed with meetings, back-to-back calls, deadlines. No, this was different. This kind of blur came from quiet routines that suddenly meant something. Morning cocoa with Lily, checking Sarah's vitals, helping her sit up, reading books aloud in the garden while Lily colored beside him. These weren't detours from his life anymore. They were his life. On the 7th day since Sarah woke up, Marcus arrived earlier than usual. He brought Lily a new box of colored pencils and Sarah a warm fleece blanket he'd seen her eyes linger on during one of the nurse's catalog flips. The room was glowing in soft light. Sarah had a little more color in her cheeks. Lily was humming something gentle while braiding her doll's hair. It felt whole, not perfect, not easy, but whole. Then came the knock on the door. It was soft, polite. A woman in a gray cardigan stepped inside, holding a slim folder and a clipboard. Her name tag read, Mara Jensen Social Services. Marcus stood instinctively. "Hi, I'm Marcus." She nodded, calm and kind. "Yes, I know. We spoke briefly on the phone last week." He gestured to the hallway. "Do you mind if we step outside?" Mara agreed, and they quietly exited the room, leaving Sarah and Lily in a world of soft humming and soft blankets. They found an empty family room down the hall. Mara opened her folder, but her tone was gentle, almost conversational. Mr. Langford, I'll start by saying, what you've done for the James family is extraordinary. Most people donate, maybe send a card. You've been here every day. You've moved mountains for them. Marcus shifted in his seat. I didn't do it for recognition. I know, she said, nodding, which is exactly why I'm here. She leaned forward slightly. Have you considered becoming Lily's legal guardian? The question didn't land like a bomb. It landed like a breath held too long. Finally released. Marcus sat back. He wasn't surprised. Not really. He'd been tucking her drawings into his pockets, picking up her favorite pastries, learning how she liked her cocoa. He knew what music helped her sleep, which books she pretended to hate but secretly adored. He hadn't planned for this, but it felt inevitable. Still, he asked, isn't her mother recovering? She is, Mara replied. But recovery isn't linear, and she's still incredibly vulnerable. If anything were to happen, the court will ask who's here, who's consistent, who's shown up. She studied him. You've become more than a visitor, Mr. Langford. You're part of her life now. He swallowed something tightening in his chest. Have you spoken to Sarah? He asked quietly. Mara nodded. I have. And she agrees if anything were to happen to her, she wants you to be the one to stay. Marcus looked down at his hands. For a moment, the past threatened to creep back in the version of himself who valued control boundaries, exits. But that man hadn't met Lily James, and that man certainly hadn't watched her fall asleep with her tiny hand curled around his finger. He looked back at Mara, voice steady. Yes, he said. If it comes to that, I want to be there for her. I already am. Mara smiled softly. Thank you. We'll begin the paperwork in the background. It doesn't have to mean anything permanent unless it needs to. When Marcus returned to the hospital room, Lily was showing Sarah her latest drawing, a squirrel wearing a superhero cape. They were laughing, genuinely. Not just surviving, but living. He stood in the doorway, watching them, that same invisible weight settling into his chest. But this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt like home. Later, when Lily crawled up next to him on the little couch beside the window, she leaned into his side and whispered, Did the lady ask you the big question? He smiled, surprised. What do you mean? She talks to all the adults about stuff. I heard her once say legal guardian to a nurse. Marcus looked down at her. She did. Lily tilted her head. What did you say? He paused, then said the only thing that mattered. I said yes. She didn't say anything for a while. Just tucked her head beneath his arm, curled into him. You're really staying, she said quietly. He nodded. Yeah, kid, I really am. A week had passed since Sarah first opened her eyes, and in that time a quiet transformation had begun. It started with small things. The way her fingers moved more easily. The way her eyes stayed open longer each morning. The way her voice, once a whisper, now carried strength, not loud, but certain. And now, it was time. The nurses called it mobility evaluation. But for Lily, it was something else entirely. It was her mom's first steps. The physical therapist had arrived early, cheerful and focused. She wheeled in a walker and stood beside Sarah's bed, clipboard in hand, rattling off gentle instructions. Marcus watched from the corner, coffee in hand, silent but rooted. Lily stood beside the bed, holding her mother's hand like it was made of glass. You don't have to do it if it hurts, she whispered. Sarah smiled at her daughter, brushing a curl from Lily's face. I want to try, sweetheart. For you. It took 2 nurses and the therapist to help her sit upright, then swing her legs over the edge of the bed. Her feet touched the cold floor, toes curling slightly at the contact. Her whole body trembled from the effort. She hadn't walked in weeks. Marcus held his breath. Okay, Sarah, the therapist said gently. One hand on the walker. I'll be here. Take your time. Sarah nodded, jaw tight. She gripped the handles and pushed. The room went silent, except for the hum of machines and the soft tap of bare feet sliding against linoleum. One step, then another, wobbling, slow, but forward. Lily gasped. Sarah paused after the third step, sweat beading on her forehead, legs shaking. But her eyes locked with her daughter's, and she kept going. 4 steps. 5. Marcus found himself gripping the back of a chair without realizing it. His heart pounding harder than it had during any boardroom deal or billion-dollar acquisition. She was doing it. She was walking. By the time Sarah reached the window, she was exhausted, but standing. She turned, looked at Lily, and smiled. Lily clapped, tears running down her cheeks. "You did it, Mom." Sarah's own eyes welled. "I told you I'd come back." The therapist carefully helped her into a chair. Sarah leaned back, breathless tears slipping down her face. Marcus stepped forward slowly. He didn't say much, just placed a water bottle in her hand and knelt beside her. "That was incredible," he said, voice low. "You're incredible." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, not as a stranger, not as the man who paid the bills, but as someone in it with her, someone who stayed. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not walking away when it would have been easier." Marcus smiled. "Some things are worth staying for." Later that afternoon, after Sarah had fallen asleep from exhaustion and the room grew quiet again, Marcus and Lily sat in the hospital garden. She was quieter than usual, kicking at a loose stone on the path. She almost fell once, Lily murmured. "But she didn't," Marcus replied. She got back up. Lily looked up at him, squinting in the sunlight. "I think she's really going to be okay." Marcus nodded. "Me too." She leaned against him again, like she had every day now, and he put his arm around her without thinking. They stayed there in that little pocket of calm for a long time, not saying much, not needing to. A mother had taken her first steps, a daughter had witnessed it, and a man once a stranger was no longer standing on the outside looking in. He was in the story now. He was family. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's first steps. Every morning now came with a little more sunlight, a little more laughter, and a little less fear. The nurses still checked vitals. The doctors still scribbled updates. But something had shifted, not in the charts, but in the energy. Sarah wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and Lily, she was blooming. No longer just the brave little girl who walked into an office with a handmade resume. Now she was the daughter who danced down hospital halls, told knock-knock jokes to nurses, and corrected Marcus's coloring technique during their nightly art sessions. And Marcus, he wasn't the same man anymore. Not even close. One morning, just after Sarah finished her rehab session, Marcus walked in with a brown envelope under one arm and a familiar cocoa in the other. He handed Lily the cocoa, then turned to Sarah. "I was wondering if we could take a short drive today," he said. Sarah raised a brow. "Where?" "Somewhere new," he said, his voice soft. An hour later, they pulled up to a quiet neighborhood near Seattle's Arboretum. Clean sidewalks, lots of trees, kids riding bikes. The kind of place that whispered peace instead of shouting wealth. Marcus parked in front of a modest, sunlit building. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, a home. Warm-colored brick, blue shutters, a porch swing. Sarah's brow furrowed. "Where are we?" Marcus smiled and handed her the envelope. She opened it slowly inside a set of keys and a simple rental agreement. Her name was on it. "Marcus, what is this?" "It's temporary," he said. "Until you're fully recovered, until you decide what comes next. But it's yours. Fully covered. Furnished, safe, and close to everything you'll need." Sarah stared at the paper. You did this for us. "I didn't want you going back to a room that didn't feel like a future," he said. "You deserve a place that feels like yours." Lily, already halfway up the front steps, called back. "Is this really ours, Mom?" Sarah's eyes welled. "It is." Inside the home was simple but beautiful. Soft rugs, bright kitchen, a cozy reading nook in the corner with shelves already filled with children's books. A framed drawing of 3 stick figures was already on the wall, Marcus's quiet way of saying, "This is where we belong." There was even a small desk with Lily's name engraved on a little gold plate. She touched it like it was made of glass. Marcus stood beside Sarah, watching Lily skip from room to room. "I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "You just have to be here." They stood in silence for a moment, watching Lily open cabinets and peek into closets. Sarah turned to him, emotion trembling in her voice. "People don't just do this." "Maybe they should," he said. She stepped closer, looked him in the eyes. "And what about you?" she asked. "Where do you belong in all of this?" Marcus didn't flinch. "With you," he said simply. "With both of you. No fanfare, no speeches, just truth." That evening, after Lily had picked her room and unpacked her backpack, they sat on the porch swing together. The sky turned lavender and gold. The wind carried the soft sound of laughter from a house nearby. Sarah leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder. Lily curled up beside them, humming quietly to herself. No hospitals, no machines, just home. For the first time since that day in his office, Marcus wasn't thinking about what came next. He was right here, where he belonged. The days settled into something that felt real, steady, almost ordinary, but in the most extraordinary way. Sarah's strength returned slowly but surely. She could walk short distances now without help. She cooked again simple meals, mostly soup and grilled cheese, but they tasted like celebration. Lily was thriving. She had a new school, new markers, a backyard to run in, and a bedtime story every single night, sometimes told by her mom, sometimes by Marcus, sometimes both. And Marcus, he found himself lingering a little longer at the front door each morning, checking one more time that the thermostat was set right, that Lily had her lunch, that Sarah had everything she needed before physical therapy. He wasn't just showing up anymore. He was home. One evening, while Lily was asleep under a pile of blankets and stuffed animals, Sarah and Marcus sat on the back porch. The stars were out. The wind carried the scent of jasmine, and the quiet between them didn't feel empty. It felt like knowing. Sarah sipped tea, then looked at Marcus. "You changed everything," she said softly. He started to shake his head, but she stopped him with a look. "No, let me say this." He nodded. "When I was in that hospital bed, I didn't think I'd ever be more than a burden. I didn't think Lily would get to be a kid again. And then you walked in. You didn't know us. You didn't owe us anything. But you stayed." Her eyes shone. "You stayed." Marcus's throat tightened. "I didn't want to just be a chapter in your story, Sarah. I wanted to be part of the book." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Then stay for all the chapters," she whispered. He nodded, speechless, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't since the day a little girl in a red sweater had asked him for a job. Later that night, as he tucked Lily in, she yawned and blinked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Hey, Marcus," she mumbled. "Yeah, kid. Are we a family now?" He froze for a second, then smiled. "The best kind," he said. "The kind that found each other." Lily grinned. "Okay, just checking." And with that, she drifted to sleep, one hand curled around his thumb. Marcus sat there for a while, watching her breathe. Then he looked around the room, the bookshelf filled with dog-eared paperbacks, the handmade drawings on the wall, the sound of Sarah's soft footsteps in the hallway. He had run entire companies, negotiated billion-dollar deals, but this was the most important thing he'd ever built. And it started with 5 words written in crayon. "I need a job, please." In the end, this wasn't a story about money or status. It wasn't about grand gestures or miracles. It was about one small voice in a big world asking for help, and someone listening. It was about what happens when we show up, when we choose kindness over convenience, when we love not because we have to, but because we can. Marcus didn't just save Sarah and Lily's lives. They saved his too. They reminded him, and maybe all of us, that the smallest moments often carry the deepest meaning. That home isn't a place, it's people. So what about you? If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments. What would you have done if a little girl walked into your office with a resume? What does family mean to you? Your thoughts matter. and your voice might be the one that helps someone else believe in love again. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional, real, and inspiring stories like this. Your support means the world, and it keeps us going. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest knock on the door changes everything.